Alessandro Romano was about to announce his engagement to the daughter of a billionaire crime family when the private elevator in his hotel opened on the wrong floor. It was supposed to take him to the ballroom. Instead, it stopped in the basement. For a moment, New York's most feared Mafia boss stood perfectly still, one hand resting against the gold elevator door, his black tuxedo still carrying the smell of champagne, expensive cigars, and power. Behind him, music thundered from the ballroom 30 floors above. Cameras flashed. Men with blood on their hands smiled like gentlemen. Women in diamonds waited to watch him place a ring on Vanessa Bellini's finger, sealing an alliance worth more than most countries. But down here, beneath the hotel's marble floors and crystal chandeliers, there was no music, only the low hum of washing machines, the sharp smell of bleach, and a woman on her knees, scrubbing red wine from the service hallway floor. She wore a faded grey cleaning uniform that hung loosely from her thin shoulders. Her dark hair was tied back with a rubber band. Her hands were red, cracked, and shaking from cold water and cheap soap. Beside her sat a metal laundry cart stacked with towels. At first, Alessandro barely looked at her. Then the cart moved. A tiny hand slipped out from beneath the towels. Alessandro's eyes narrowed. A little girl, no more than 5 years old, was curled inside the cart, wrapped in a hotel blanket that had been folded around her like a nest. She was asleep, her cheek pressed against a worn brown teddy bear with one missing eye. Alessandro felt something strange tighten in his chest. No child belonged in the basement of his hotel at midnight. One of his guards stepped forward. "Boss, we should go back up. The guests are waiting." Alessandro didn't move. The little girl stirred, blinking against the harsh fluorescent light. She lifted her head slowly, confused and sleepy, clutching the teddy bear to her chest. Then she looked directly at him. Alessandro stopped. Her eyes were grey, not soft grey, not blue-grey, not the innocent color children sometimes had before they grew into themselves. They were cold steel grey, Romano eyes, the same eyes his father had, the same eyes Alessandro saw every morning in the mirror, the same eyes that had made grown men lower their voices and step aside. The woman on the floor noticed the silence. Her body froze. Slowly she turned her head. The mop slipped from her hand. The moment Alessandro saw her face, the entire hotel seemed to disappear. 5 years of anger, 5 years of hatred, 5 years of believing she had betrayed him, all of it cracked open in one breath. "Elena," he whispered. The woman's face went pale. She grabbed the edge of the laundry cart and pulled it behind her, as if her own body could hide the child from him. "No," she breathed, terror shaking through her voice. "You're not supposed to be here." Alessandro took one step out of the elevator. His engagement ring box was still in his pocket. His future wife was waiting upstairs. His empire was watching. But his eyes stayed locked on the little girl in the laundry cart. And when the child rubbed her eyes and whispered, "Mama, is that the bad man?" Alessandro felt the blood drain from his face. The words hit Alessandro harder than any bullet ever had. The bad man. He had been called worse. Monster, butcher, king, devil. Men had whispered those names behind locked doors, and Alessandro had never cared. Fear was useful. Fear kept enemies obedient. Fear built walls around an empire that had been born in blood and polished in gold. But this was different. This name had come from a child hiding in a laundry cart, a child with his eyes. Elena pulled the girl closer, her hand trembling as she smoothed the blanket over the child's shoulders. "Sophia, don't speak." Sophia. The name cut through him. Alessandro looked from the little girl to Elena, then back again. His mind began doing the math before his heart was ready to accept it. 5 years. Elena had disappeared 5 years ago. 5 years ago, he had come home from Sicily and found divorce papers on his desk, half the money from one of his private accounts gone, and photographs of Elena stepping into a car with a man from the Bellini family. 5 years ago, Alessandro Romano had believed the only woman he had ever loved had sold him to his enemies. Now she was kneeling in the basement of his own hotel, cleaning floors for minimum wage, while a little girl with Romano eyes slept in a cart full of towels. His voice dropped. "How old is she?" Elena's mouth tightened. She didn't answer. That silence was enough. Alessandro stepped closer. 2 of his guards moved with him, but Elena reacted like a cornered animal. She shoved the laundry cart behind her and stood up so fast her knees nearly buckled. "Don't come near her." Alessandro stopped, not because he was afraid of Elena, because for the first time in years, he saw fear on her face that was not fear for herself. It was fear for the child. "Elena," he said slowly. "How old is she?" Her eyes burned with something sharper than panic. "Old enough to know you don't belong near her." One of the guards frowned. "Watch your tone." Alessandro raised one hand without looking at him. The guard went silent. Sophia peeked around her mother's skirt, still clutching the broken teddy bear. Her small face was pale with sleep and confusion. A thin silver chain hung around her neck, tucked partly beneath the hotel blanket. Alessandro saw the pendant. His chest locked. It was a small, black, onyx cross. The Romano family crest was carved into the center. Only 3 people had ever owned one like it. His grandfather, his father, and him. He remembered placing that pendant around Elena's neck the night they married in secret at a small chapel in Brooklyn, far away from the family priests, the cameras, and the men who would have called her unworthy. He remembered telling her, "This means you are mine." She had smiled then and whispered, "No, Alessandro, it means you are mine too." Now that same pendant hung around a little girl's neck. His little girl. Alessandro's jaw tightened. Where did she get that? Elena's hand flew to the chain, hiding it beneath the blanket. "It's nothing. Don't lie to me." A bitter laugh broke from her lips. "That's rich, coming from you." The elevator doors behind him began to close. One of his guards caught them with his hand. From upstairs, Alessandro's phone started vibrating. Vanessa. Then his consigliere. Then his mother. The whole ballroom was waiting for him to come back and become the man they had designed him to be. But Alessandro could not take his eyes off Sophia. The child tilted her head, studying his face with strange, quiet seriousness. Then she asked, "Mama, why does he look like the picture in your old box?" Elena went completely still. Alessandro looked at her. "What picture?" he asked. Elena swallowed hard. For 1 second, the mask slipped. Beneath the uniform, the exhaustion, and the fear, he saw the woman he had once loved, and she looked at him like he had already destroyed her once. "Please," she whispered. "Don't do this here." Alessandro stepped fully into the basement hallway. The elevator doors slid shut behind him. Upstairs, his engagement party continued without him. Down here, in the bleach-scented silence, his past had finally opened its eyes. Elena moved first. She grabbed the handle of the laundry cart and tried to push it past him, her body angled between Alessandro and Sophia, as if the narrow basement hallway were a battlefield. "Move," she said. Alessandro did not. "Elena, don't say my name like you still have the right." The words landed clean and sharp. One of the guards shifted his weight, offended on Alessandro's behalf, but Alessandro lifted one finger. The guard froze again. Elena's eyes flicked toward the elevator, then toward the service stairs. She was calculating escape routes. He could see it. 5 years ago, Elena had moved through his world with soft hands and nervous smiles, always trying not to disturb the dangerous men around him. This woman was different. This woman looked ready to fight him with a mop handle if it meant keeping Sophia behind her. Alessandro's gaze dropped to her uniform. The name tag pinned crookedly over her chest did not say Elena Romano. It said Lena Hart. His jaw flexed. "You changed your name." I changed everything. Because you were hiding? Because I was surviving. The answer came too fast, too practiced. Like she had said it to herself every night, just to keep standing. Alessandro stepped closer, slow enough not to frighten the child. You disappeared with my money, with Bellini men, with secrets from my family. Elena's face hardened. There it is. What? The version of the story your mother fed you. At the mention of his mother, something dark passed over Alessandro's eyes. Valentina Romano was waiting upstairs beside Vanessa Bellini, smiling for cameras, pretending to bless an engagement she had arranged with surgical precision. She had spent 5 years teaching Alessandro that love was weakness, that Elena was poison, that the right wife was one who strengthened the family instead of softening him. Elena looked toward the elevator doors as if she could feel Valentina's shadow pressing through the steel. You should go back upstairs, she said. Your fiancée is waiting. She is not my wife. Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. Neither am I. You made sure of that. Alessandro's voice lowered. You signed the divorce papers. No. Elena's eyes flashed. You signed them. I was never given a choice. The hallway seemed to shrink around them. Sophia clutched the teddy bear tighter. Mama? Elena immediately softened. She knelt beside the cart and touched the child's cheek. It's okay, baby. Close your eyes. But Sophia did not close them. She kept staring at Alessandro. That stare did something cruel to him. She looked at him with fear, yes, but also with curiosity. A child trying to understand why the man from an old photograph was standing in front of her like a storm, wearing a tuxedo. Alessandro swallowed the pressure in his throat. Elena, he said, quieter now. Is she mine? For a moment, all the sound in the basement faded. The machines, the pipes, the distant music from the ballroom. Elena stood slowly. Her hands were shaking, but her voice did not break. You don't get to ask that like a wounded man. His eyes sharpened. Answer me. No, you answer me. She took one step toward him, her tired face suddenly burning with 5 years of buried rage. Where were you when I slept in church basements with her inside me? Where were you when I gave birth with a fake name because your family had men watching every hospital in Manhattan? Where were you when she was 3 months old and I had to choose between formula and heat? Alessandro went still. Elena's eyes filled, but she refused to let the tears fall. You want to know if she is yours? Look at her. Look at her eyes. Look at the way she frowns when she is scared. Look at that pendant around her neck. Then ask yourself why I would keep the only piece of you I had left if I had betrayed you. Alessandro looked at Sophia. The child was crying silently now. Not loudly, not dramatically. Just 2 clean tears sliding down her small face, while she tried to be brave for her mother. Something inside him began to break. Before he could speak, the service elevator chimed behind him. The doors opened. A woman's voice cut through the basement, like a blade wrapped in silk. Alessandro, darling, there you are. Elena's face turned white. Alessandro slowly turned. Valentina Romano stepped out of the elevator in a black couture gown, diamonds at her throat and a smile on her mouth. But her eyes were fixed on Sophia, and in that instant, Elena pushed the cart behind her again, because the real monster had finally come downstairs. Valentina Romano did not look surprised. That was the first thing Alessandro noticed. Not shocked, not confused, not even curious. His mother stood in the basement hallway of his hotel, surrounded by bleach, dirty towels, and humming machines, looking at Elena and the child as if she had found a stain that needed to be removed before the guests upstairs noticed. Her smile remained perfect. Elena, Valentina said softly. Or should I call you Lena now? Alessandro's head turned slowly toward his mother. You knew. Valentina ignored him. Her eyes slid down to Sophia, lingering on the grey eyes, the black onyx pendant, the frightened little hands wrapped around the broken teddy bear. My God, she murmured. She really does have the Romano face. Elena's hand tightened around the cart handle until her knuckles went white. Stay away from her. Valentina lifted one elegant brow. Still dramatic, I see. Alessandro stepped between them. Mother. Only then did Valentina look at him. Her expression softened into something almost maternal, but Alessandro knew that face. He had seen it at funerals, at negotiations, at dinner tables where men smiled before ordering death. It was not love. It was control wearing lipstick. You need to come upstairs, she said. Vanessa's father is asking questions. The commission is watching. Whatever this is, it can be handled quietly. This, Alessandro said, his voice turning cold, is my daughter. A heavy silence fell. One of the guards lowered his eyes. Elena stopped breathing. Valentina's smile thinned. You don't know that. I know. You are emotional. I am looking at her. You are seeing what you want to see. Alessandro took a step closer to his mother. And what did you see 5 years ago when you told me Elena betrayed me? For the first time, Valentina's face changed. Only a fraction. But Alessandro saw it. So did Elena. A bitter sound escaped Elena's throat. Ask her about the photographs. Alessandro did not look away from his mother. What photographs? Elena's voice shook, but she forced every word out. The ones of me getting into a Bellini car. The ones she gave you while you were in Sicily. Did she tell you who was in that car with me? Alessandro's eyes darkened. Valentina exhaled softly. Do not start this. No, Elena said. You don't get to silence me anymore. Sophia whimpered, and Elena reached back, touching her hair without turning around. Then she looked at Alessandro. I wasn't running away with Bellini men. I was being taken. The hallway went still. They came to the apartment 2 hours after you left for Sicily. 3 men. One of them wore your family ring. I thought they were yours. Her mouth trembled. They told me you had discovered the pregnancy and wanted the problem gone before it embarrassed the Romano name. Alessandro's face emptied of color. No. Yes. Elena's eyes filled, but she did not blink. I begged them to call you. I told them you didn't know about the baby yet. They laughed. They said Valentina already knew. Alessandro turned toward his mother. Valentina's jaw tightened. She was a threat. The words were quiet, clean, unashamed. Something inside Alessandro went very still. Elena let out a broken breath, as if hearing the confession out loud had torn open an old wound. She was my wife, Alessandro said. She was a waitress from Queens, Valentina snapped, the silk finally ripping from her voice. A pretty distraction you married in secret like a foolish boy. She softened you. She made you question orders. She made you dream about houses with gardens and children without bodyguards. Do you know what men like Bellini would have done with that weakness? Alessandro stared at her as if he had never seen her before. Valentina pointed towards Sophia. And then she became pregnant. With an heir no one approved. A child that could have split the family before you were strong enough to hold it. So you tried to have us killed, Elena whispered. Valentina looked at her with icy contempt. I tried to protect my son's empire. Elena laughed once, raw and hollow. No, you tried to protect your control over him. Alessandro said nothing. His silence was worse than shouting. Elena swallowed hard and continued. The man driving the car took pity on me. His name was Marco. He said he had a sister who died carrying a child. He dropped me outside a women's shelter in Newark with $200 and a warning. Her voice broke. He told me if I ever came back as Elena Romano, your mother would finish the job. So I became Lena Hart. I cleaned motel rooms. I washed dishes. I slept sitting up in laundromats because Sophia kicked too hard when I lay down. I gave birth under a fake name because every hospital record scared me. Sophia began to cry softly. Elena turned, lifting the little girl from the cart and holding her tight. She learned to sleep beside washing machines because that was the only place warm enough. She learned not to ask for toys because I could barely buy food. And every birthday, She asked why the man in the picture never came. Alessandro's eyes moved to Sofia. The child buried her face in Elena's neck. Elena looked back at him, her voice dropping into something quieter than anger. I didn't keep her from you because I hated you, Alessandro. I kept her alive because I believed you had chosen your family over ours. For 1 second, Alessandro could not speak. Then Valentina stepped forward and said coldly, Enough. Give the child to me before this becomes uglier. Elena's arms locked around Sofia. Alessandro turned, and the look on his face made even his guards step back. Touch them, he said to his mother, and you will learn exactly what kind of man you created. Valentina did not move. For the first time in Alessandro's life, his mother looked at him and saw something she could not command. Not a son, not an heir, not the boy she had shaped into a weapon. A father. Her eyes narrowed. You would threaten your own mother for a woman who lied to you? Alessandro's voice was quiet. She didn't lie. She vanished. You made her vanish. She kept your child from you. You tried to erase my child before she was born. The words struck the hallway like thunder. Elena flinched, not because she disagreed, but because hearing the truth spoken aloud made it real in a way silence never had. Sofia clung to her neck. Small fingers twisted in the collar of her cleaning uniform. Alessandro looked at the girl. His daughter. The word did not feel soft in his chest. It felt like a blade turning slowly. 5 years. 5 years of birthdays he had missed. 5 years of fevers, nightmares, first steps, first words. 5 years where Sofia had slept in laundry rooms, while he slept above the city, in rooms guarded by men with guns. 5 years where Elena had carried everything alone. His wealth had filled towers. His daughter had hidden under towels. Something in him broke so completely that even his anger could not cover it. He stepped toward Sofia, then stopped himself. Not because he did not want to hold her, because he had not earned the right. Elena, he said, his voice rough, let me get you both out of here. Elena looked at him with red eyes. Out of here? To where? Upstairs, so they can stare at us between champagne glasses? To your penthouse, so Sofia can learn what kind of family tried to kill her before she took her first breath? No. Then where, Alessandro? He had no answer fast enough. That hurt worse than her anger. Because once, he had been a man who promised her the world. Now, standing in a basement beneath his own hotel, he could not even promise safety without proving it first. Elena saw the hesitation and smiled, sadly. That's what I thought. She shifted Sofia higher on her hip and reached for the laundry cart with her free hand. Come on, baby! Alessandro blocked the cart gently. You are not going back to cleaning floors tonight. Elena's face hardened again. I have rent due tomorrow. I own this hotel. I know. Her voice cracked. That's the cruel part. The line hit him directly in the chest. Valentina gave a sharp, impatient laugh. This is absurd. Give her money and send her away. The child can be tested quietly. If she is yours, arrangements can be made. Elena's arms tightened around Sofia. Arrangements? Alessandro repeated. Valentina straightened. A child of Romano blood cannot be raised by a basement maid. The temperature in Alessandro's expression dropped. She was raised by the only parent who protected her. Valentina's lips pressed together. Alessandro turned to one of his guards. Take my mother upstairs. Valentina's eyes widened. Excuse me? Now. The guard hesitated. That hesitation told Alessandro everything. His mother still had hands inside his organization. Men who smiled at him, took his orders, and still wondered whether the old queen had more power than the new king. Alessandro reached into his jacket and removed the small velvet ring box from his pocket. The engagement ring inside was worth $4 million. A diamond, chosen by Valentina, approved by Vanessa's father, designed to bind him to a future he no longer recognized. Alessandro opened the box. For 1 second, the diamond caught the basement light and flashed like ice. Then he dropped it into the dirty mop bucket beside Elena's feet. The splash echoed through the hallway. Valentina went still. The guard lowered his eyes, and Elena stared at the bucket as if she could not understand what she had just seen. Alessandro looked at his mother. "Go upstairs," he said. "Tell Vanessa the engagement is over." Valentina's voice turned deadly soft. "You are making a mistake. You will not survive." Alessandro stepped closer to her, his face calm in a way that was far more dangerous than rage. "No, mother. I made that mistake 5 years ago." He turned back to Elena and Sophia. The little girl was watching him now, still afraid, still confused, but no longer hiding her face. Alessandro lowered himself slowly to one knee on the cold basement floor, not in front of his mother, not in front of his guards, in front of his daughter. "My name is Alessandro," he said gently. "And I know I am the bad man in your story." Sophia blinked. Elena stopped breathing. Alessandro's voice broke on the next words. "But if your mother allows it, I would like to spend the rest of my life becoming someone safer." Sophia stared at Alessandro for a long time. Her small fingers tightened around the teddy bear. Her eyes moved from his face to Elena's, asking a question she did not know how to say. Elena looked away first. That hurt him. More than Sophia's fear, more than Valentina's betrayal, more than the 5 years he had lost, because Elena had once looked at him like he was the safest place in the world. Now she looked at the floor, because safety was the one thing he had failed to become. "Get up," Elena whispered. Alessandro slowly rose, not because he wanted to, because she had asked. Valentina watched the entire exchange with a face carved from ice. "How touching," she said. "The king kneels in a laundry hallway and mistakes guilt for love." Alessandro did not turn around. "You are still here. I am your mother. You stopped being that when you ordered men to hunt my pregnant wife." For 1 second, something ugly flashed in Valentina's eyes. Then she smiled. It was small, almost invisible. But Elena saw it, and her entire body went rigid. Alessandro saw Elena's reaction before he understood the reason. "What?" he asked. Elena's voice dropped. "She's not afraid." Valentina's smile deepened. Alessandro turned sharply toward his guards. "Lock down the basement. Now." Too late. The lights flickered once. Then the hallway went dark. Sophia screamed. Elena pulled the child against her chest and dropped to the floor beside the laundry cart. Alessandro's hand went under his tuxedo jacket. But before he could draw his weapon, emergency lights blinked on, bathing the basement in a dull red glow. The service elevator chimed again. This time, no one stepped out in diamonds. 3 men in black maintenance uniforms entered the hallway. They were not hotel staff. Alessandro knew it before the first man reached for the inside of his jacket. His guards moved fast. Not fast enough. A suppressed shot cracked through the narrow hallway, muffled but sharp. One of Alessandro's guards slammed back against the wall and fell. Sophia sobbed into Elena's shoulder. Elena did not freeze. She dragged the laundry cart sideways and shoved it between Sophia and the men, towels spilling across the floor like a weak, desperate wall. Then she crawled backward, pulling her daughter behind a row of industrial dryers. "Stay down," she whispered against Sophia's hair. "Do not make a sound." Alessandro moved in front of them. The man who had ruled New York's underworld with cold calculation was gone. What stood there now was something more dangerous. A father who had just found his child, and men had come to take her away. One attacker raised his weapon. Alessandro fired first. The man dropped behind the laundry cart. The second rushed from the side, but Alessandro caught him by the wrist, slammed him into the concrete wall, and drove an elbow into his throat hard enough to send him collapsing to the floor, gasping. No wasted motion. No speech. No mercy. Valentina stepped backward toward the elevator, her face calm even as chaos filled the hallway. Alessandro saw her. "You brought them here," he said. Valentina's answer was soft. "I brought order." The third attacker moved toward the dryers. toward Elena. Toward Sofia. Elena grabbed the only thing within reach, a heavy metal laundry hook used to pull sheets from the industrial machines. Her hands shook, but her eyes did not. The man rounded the dryer. Elena swung. The hook struck his wrist. His weapon clattered across the tile. He cursed and lunged for her, but Elena threw her body between him and Sofia, taking the impact against her shoulder. She hit the floor hard, but her arm stayed locked around her daughter. Run, Sofia. The little girl did not move. She was frozen, crying, pressed against the dryer. Alessandro turned at the sound of Elena hitting the floor. Something ancient and violent opened inside him. He crossed the hallway in 3 strides, grabbed the attacker by the back of his collar, and slammed him face first into the steel edge of the dryer. The man crumpled. Silence followed. Not peace, just silence. The kind that came after a room remembered how close death had been. Alessandro knelt beside Elena. Are you hurt? Elena pushed his hand away and reached for Sofia first. Baby, look at me. Are you hurt? Sofia shook her head, sobbing. Only then did Elena let out a breath. Alessandro looked at them on the floor of his hotel basement, surrounded by spilled towels, broken glass, blood on white tile, and red emergency light. His mother had not just lied, she had tried again. In front of him, Valentina stood near the open elevator, her expression unreadable. Alessandro rose slowly. Every man in the hallway felt the change, even Valentina. He looked at his last standing guard. Call Dominic. Call every captain still loyal to me. The guard swallowed. And your mother? Alessandro's eyes never left Valentina. She doesn't leave this hotel. Valentina lifted her chin. You would start a war over a maid and a child? Alessandro's voice was cold enough to make the basement feel frozen. No, he said. You started it 5 years ago. Then he looked back at Elena and Sofia. And tonight, I end it. Alessandro did not take Elena and Sofia to his penthouse. He took them to the hotel's private medical suite, a room no guest knew existed, guarded by men whose loyalty had been tested in blood. A doctor examined Elena's shoulder while Sofia sat beside her on the bed, wrapped in Alessandro's tuxedo jacket. The sleeves swallowed her hands. The black fabric looked enormous around her small body. Alessandro stood near the door. He wanted to move closer. He did not. Elena had spent 5 years running from his name. The least he could do was stop using his power to invade every inch of the room. The child is unharmed, the doctor said. Mrs. Hart has bruising, but nothing appears broken. Mrs. Hart. The false name twisted inside Alessandro. Thank you, Elena whispered. When the doctor left, silence settled over the room. Sofia looked at Alessandro from beneath the oversized jacket. Did your mama send those bad men? Elena closed her eyes. Alessandro did not lie. Yes. The child stared down at the teddy bear in her lap. Why? Because she was afraid. Of me? The question nearly brought him to his knees again. No, Piccola. His voice roughened. She was afraid of losing control. That is not the same as being afraid of you. Sofia thought about that. Then she asked the question Alessandro had known was coming. Why didn't you find us? Elena looked sharply at him. She did not rescue him from the question. She did not soften it. And Alessandro understood that this was the first price he had to pay. He moved closer, stopping several feet from the bed. Because I believed a lie, he said. Sofia frowned. But you're a boss. Mama said bosses know everything. A broken sound escaped Elena. Almost a laugh, almost a sob. Alessandro lowered his eyes. I should have known better. Did you look for Mama? He could have said yes. He had sent men through airports, ports, and safe houses. He had hunted Elena for months, but not because he believed she needed saving, because he believed she deserved punishment. So he gave his daughter the truth. I looked for her, he said, but for the wrong reason. Elena turned her face away. Sofia's small expression tightened. Then Mama was right. You were the bad man. Alessandro took the words, without defending himself. Yes. The room went quiet again. Then his phone vibrated. Dominic's name appeared on the screen. Alessandro answered. "We found the records," Dominic said. "Payments to Marco. Hospital searches under Elena's maiden name. The divorce documents were filed using a forged signature. Your mother kept everything." Alessandro's hand tightened around the phone. "And upstairs? Vanessa's father knows the engagement is over. The commission wants an explanation. Valentina's people are already calling this a kidnapping." Alessandro looked at Elena. She was pale and exhausted, one arm wrapped around Sofia. She had nothing left except the truth, and even that had nearly been buried. "I will give them an explanation," Alessandro said. He ended the call. Elena studied him. "What are you going to do?" "Tell the commission what she did. End the Bellini alliance. Remove every man loyal to her. And then? Recognize Sofia publicly as my daughter." Elena's expression changed. Not relief. Fear. "You think announcing her name will protect her?" "No," Alessandro said. "Hiding her would only prove my mother was right, that you and Sofia are something shameful to be kept beneath this hotel." Elena looked at him for a long moment. "You could lose everything. I already lost everything 5 years ago." The words landed between them. For the first time, Elena's anger weakened enough for pain to show through. Alessandro held out his hand, but he did not step closer. "I will not ask you to trust me tonight," he said, "but I will tell the truth in front of every person who benefited from your silence." Elena looked at his hand, then at Sofia, then toward the ceiling, where powerful families were still waiting beneath chandeliers, champagne glasses, and lies. Slowly, Elena stood. She did not take Alessandro's hand. Instead, she lifted her chin and said, "Then don't hide us in this room." Alessandro's eyes locked onto hers. Elena adjusted Sofia's blanket and walked toward the door. "Take me upstairs." The ballroom doors opened at exactly midnight. Conversation stopped first. Then the orchestra. Hundreds of guests turned toward Alessandro, expecting to see Vanessa Bellini on his arm and a diamond on her finger. Instead, he entered beside Elena. She still wore the grey cleaning uniform. A bruise darkened one shoulder, and her hair had come loose around her tired face. Sofia walked between them, wrapped in Alessandro's tuxedo jacket and holding her broken teddy bear. The contrast was brutal. Crystal chandeliers glittered above women in couture gowns. Champagne flowed across white linen. Armed men disguised as businessmen watched a hotel maid enter as if she belonged there. Elena's steps slowed. Alessandro noticed. "You can leave," he murmured. "No one would blame you." Elena looked toward Sofia. "I spent 5 years hiding from these people," she said. "I'm done teaching my daughter to be ashamed." Then she kept walking. At the center of the ballroom stood Vanessa Bellini, still wearing the red gown chosen for her engagement announcement. Valentina sat several feet away under guard, her expression cold and composed. Vanessa stared at Elena's uniform with open disgust. "You abandoned our alliance for housekeeping staff?" Alessandro removed the microphone from the podium. "No," he said. "I abandoned an alliance built on a lie." The room tightened. He faced the commission. 5 years ago, Elena Romano was accused of betraying my family. Those accusations were fabricated. Her signature was forged. She was abducted while pregnant and forced into hiding by order of Valentina Romano. Whispers spread across the ballroom. Valentina rose. "He is emotional. He has been manipulated." Alessandro held up his phone. The screens behind him lit with bank transfers, hospital searches, forged documents, and recorded orders bearing Valentina's authorization. The room fell silent again. Elena did not look at the evidence. She looked at Alessandro. He continued, "For 5 years, this woman raised my daughter alone while my family searched for them as targets. Tonight, the same people tried to kill them beneath this hotel." Sofia's hand slipped into Elena's. Alessandro's voice hardened. "Elena is not a scandal. Sofia is not an inconvenience. They are my family." Valentina's face finally cracked. And what does that make me? Alessandro looked at the woman who had raised him to believe power mattered more than love. A warning. He turned to Dominic. Remove her name from every Romano account, property, and command. She leaves New York before sunrise. Valentina stared at him. You would exile your mother for her? Alessandro looked at Elena. No, he said. I am exiling you because she survived what you did. Then he placed the microphone down and stepped away from the podium. But Elena did not follow him. She moved toward Valentina instead. For 5 years, she had imagined this moment. Now the entire criminal world watched as the former hotel maid stopped before the woman who had stolen her marriage, her safety, and her daughter's childhood. Elena lifted her chin. You failed, she said quietly. I'm still here. 1 year later, Elena no longer cleaned the basement floors of the Romano Hotel. But she did not become Alessandro's wife again overnight. She refused the penthouse at first, refused the designer clothes, refused the bank account he opened in her name. I survived without your money, she told him. Do not confuse comfort with trust. So Alessandro did the only thing he had never learned to do. He waited. He attended Sofia's school meetings without bodyguards crowding the hallway. He learned how she liked her pancakes, which stories helped her sleep, and why thunderstorms made her hide beneath the bed. He never demanded that she call him Papa. He earned every small step. Elena watched him closely. She saw him cancel meetings when Sofia had a fever. She saw him sit outside her bedroom after nightmares, never entering unless she asked. She saw him remove men from his organization who had stayed silent while Valentina hunted them. He did not erase the past. He built proof against it. On Sofia's 6th birthday, Alessandro brought Elena back to the ballroom where the truth had finally been spoken. The chandeliers were dimmed. There were no commission members, no cameras, and no alliance waiting to be signed. Only Sofia, laughing beneath a ceiling of silver balloons. Alessandro stood beside Elena, near the empty dance floor. I used to believe power meant no one could take anything from me, he said. Elena looked toward their daughter. But they did, she replied. Yes. He did not defend himself. That was how she knew he had changed. Alessandro reached into his pocket and removed the black onyx pendant Sofia had worn in the basement. He had repaired the broken chain, but left every scratch in the stone. I won't ask you to forget what happened, he said. I won't even ask you to forgive me tonight. He placed the pendant in Elena's palm. I'm only asking for the chance to keep showing you who I should have been. Elena closed her fingers around it. Across the room, Sofia looked up from her birthday cake. Papa, she called. Come help me. Alessandro froze. It was the first time she had called him that. His eyes filled before he could hide it. Elena saw the feared Mafia boss standing speechless beneath silver balloons, broken open by a single word from his daughter. Then she reached for his hand. Not because the past was gone, because, for the first time, the future belonged to her. The Romano family still had a boss, but its heart belonged to the woman who had survived without one. Elena was never rescued by Alessandro. She had already survived without him. She worked through exhaustion, protected her daughter from a powerful family, and carried the truth when no one was willing to believe her. Alessandro did not give her strength. He finally learned to recognize the strength that had been standing in front of him all along. He could command an empire, but he could not command Elena's forgiveness. He had to earn it through patience, honesty, and every ordinary moment he had missed as a father. Sofia gave him a second chance. Elena gave him a path toward redemption. But do you believe Alessandro suffered enough for abandoning them? Or should Elena have walked away forever? Tell us in the comments. And subscribe for more Mafia romance stories about betrayal, survival, family, and love that must be earned.